Rain hammered the windshield in relentless sheets, the wipers scraping a stuttering rhythm across the glass. Nathan Caldwell leaned forward in his seat, peering through the downpour as headlights barely cut through the curtain of gray. His jaw clenched with every mile. The road had narrowed into a winding two-lane stretch lined by tall trees and fogged-over signs, each one unreadable until it was already behind him. He checked his phone again. No bars, no signal, and the battery was nearly gone. He tossed it onto the passenger seat with a tired sigh and looked in the rearview mirror. In the back, his daughter Emily was curled up in her booster seat with a worn pink blanket wrapped around her. Her small face was flushed from sleep, her breath fogging the window. Her stuffed bunny, more patch than plush these days, was cradled in the crook of her arm. Nathan swallowed hard. She deserved better than this. A late-night drive to nowhere because he'd panicked, thrown clothes into a duffel bag, and driven away from the penthouse apartment he used to call home. No plan, just the echo of a judge's final ruling in his ears and the silence of a family courtroom after the gavel fell. The car shuddered, once then again. Then the engine let out a slow, defeated groan and died, the headlights dimmed to yellow shadows. "No," Nathan muttered, jamming the key forward. The engine clicked, nothing. "Daddy," Emily's voice was thin with sleep. "Why did we stop?" He turned back to her, schooling his voice into calm. "Just a little car trouble. We'll be fine." She nodded, already half back to sleep. Nathan stepped out into the rain. Cold water soaked him instantly, heavy and fast like it had been waiting for this moment. He pulled up the hood of his coat, then bent under the raised hood of the car, pretending to inspect the engine. The truth was, he had no idea what he was looking at. He could read a profit-loss statement blindfolded but couldn't begin to guess why the car, less than a year old, had decided to give up now. The road behind them was empty. Ahead it curved out of sight, dark and thick with forest. He wiped his face with a wet sleeve, heart pounding harder than it should. There was something about being stranded with a child that magnified everything, every unknown, every shadow, every drop of rain like a ticking clock. Then through the roar of the storm he saw it, a flicker of light, dim, flickering but unmistakably warm, not a street lamp, a house, maybe a cabin. He slammed the hood down and rushed back to the car, yanking open the door. "Emily, sweetheart, I need you to wake up for a minute, okay?" Her eyes blinked open. "Are we here?" "Not yet, but there's a place just up the road. We're going to go there and get out of this rain. Can you walk?" She nodded sleepily, arms rising for him without hesitation. He wrapped her in the blanket, tucked her bunny under one arm, and lifted her out into the rain. Her small arms looped around his neck, and she buried her face against his shoulder, trusting, warm despite the cold. Nathan started walking. The mud sucked at his shoes, rain dripping into his collar and wind pushing hard at his back. The road curved tighter and the trees leaned in, the world closing down to footsteps and storm. But the light grew closer, steadier now. A porch lamp, yellow and swaying, hanging from the eave of a squat wooden cabin tucked just off the road. He paused at the edge of the gravel path, heart thudding, then climbed the steps and knocked hard. No answer. He knocked again, louder this time. Then he heard it, the shuffle of movement inside, a lock turning, a pause. The door opened a crack and warm lamplight spilled out, haloing the woman who stood there. She was in her early 30s, hair pulled back in a loose braid, sleeves pushed to her elbows. There was flour on her forearm, a smudge of it near her cheek. She didn't smile. She didn't ask what he was doing out there. She just looked at him, then down at the child in his arms, and finally stepped back. "Come in," she said. "No questions." Nathan hesitated only a moment before stepping over the threshold. The door closed behind him with a soft click, cutting off the sound of the rain. The cabin was small but warm, filled with the scent of something baked and sweet. A fire snapped in a stone hearth, throwing gold across the walls. He stood dripping on the entryway rug, Emily stirring in his arms. "You're soaked," the woman said, her voice low but steady. "There are towels by the stove. You can lay her on the couch, it's warm." He moved stiffly, as though unsure he wasn't dreaming. He set Emily down, wrapped her in a fleece blanket the woman handed him, then sank onto the edge of the couch with a weight he hadn't noticed he'd been carrying. She moved through the room quietly, her presence gentle but sure. She brought him a towel and a cup of something hot. "I'm sorry to barge in," he said finally, voice rough. "The car died, I didn't know where else to go." "You picked the right door," she said. He looked up. "I'm me," she added. "You don't have to explain anything tonight. Rest. We'll sort it out in the morning." And somehow in that moment, with storm still raging outside and a stranger standing in her kitchen, he believed her. Nathan woke before sunrise, unsure at first where he was. The cabin was quiet, the kind of quiet that comes only when the rain has passed and the world hasn't yet stirred to life again. A faint blue light seeped in through the curtains. The fire had gone down to embers. He was sitting up on the same couch, a knitted blanket draped over his shoulders. Emily was curled next to him, her bunny tucked under her chin, still sound asleep. Her hair had dried in wild little waves across her forehead. He exhaled slowly, the stillness wrapping around him. The chaos of the night before felt like it belonged to another life, but the ache in his back and the stiffness in his limbs reminded him it hadn't been a dream. He stood carefully, stretching silently so as not to wake her, then padded toward the kitchen. The room was warm with residual heat from the wood stove. A kettle steamed softly on the back burner, and Mee was already there, sleeves rolled again, her hair tucked back but looser this time. She was barefoot, moving quietly as if she'd been up for hours. She glanced at him but didn't break the silence. Just reached into the cupboard, pulled down another mug, and poured him a cup of tea. He accepted it without a word, feeling the heat seep into his hands. He didn't usually drink tea. He was a black coffee with 2 espressos kind of man, the kind who used caffeine as armor. But this wasn't armor. This was warmth, earthy, simple. "Did you sleep?" she asked quietly. He nodded, looking at the tea. "Surprisingly well." She leaned against the counter, her arms folded. She wore a soft gray sweater and jeans that were worn at the knees, and for a moment Nathan found himself studying her not with the instincts of a CEO, but with the vague awareness of someone who hadn't truly looked at another person in a long time. "Where are we?" he asked. "Outside of Ashland. My place is just off Route 41, a couple miles from town." She sipped from her mug. "The storm hit fast. You're not the first one who's ended up here needing shelter." "Is it always this quiet?" "That's part of the draw." He glanced toward the front window. Trees lined the yard, still dripping with last night's rain. Beyond them, fog sat low on the hills like a blanket pulled over the town. "I'm Nathan, by the way," he said, "and that's my daughter, Emily." "I figured," Mee said, a flicker of a smile touching her mouth. "She's sweet, she talked in her sleep." He blinked. "What did she say?" "She asked someone not to leave." His grip tightened slightly on the mug. "She's been through a lot." "I can tell," her voice didn't pry, it simply made room. Nathan looked around the room, its tidy surfaces, the smell of cinnamon baked into the air. There was a comfort here that didn't announce itself, a kind of belonging without ceremony. He cleared his throat. "I'll call a tow truck once my phone charges. We won't be in your way for long." "You're not in the way," she said, without pause. "Stay as long as you need. Storm like that can throw more than just a wrench in the road." He glanced at her again, trying to place her. There was something steady in her, like a current that moved underground, quiet but powerful. She had the air of someone who wasn't trying to prove anything. He couldn't remember the last time he'd met someone who didn't want something from him. "You live here alone?" he asked. She nodded. "I moved here 2 years ago, bought the place from an old friend. It needed work, still does." "Why here?" "I needed quiet," she said, "and space." Nathan thought about that. Thought about the way his own life had been filled with noise, meetings that bled into evenings, dinners where his phone never left the table, the way silence at home had turned sharp instead of soft. He had once believed that success came in boardroom victories and well-oiled schedules. But lately, it felt like all the things that mattered had been slipping through cracks he didn't know were there. "Do you have kids?" he asked. Mee shook her head. "No, just me, and the occasional stranded traveler." He laughed softly, and it surprised him how strange it felt to hear that sound come from his own mouth. Emily stirred then, her small feet thumping softly on the wooden floor as she wandered in, blanket still wrapped around her shoulders. Mee bent slightly. "Good morning, Emily." Emily blinked up at her. Are you a witch? Nathan nearly choked on his tea. Me just smiled. Nope, but I do make a mean apple pancake. Emily's eyes lit up, with syrup. Of course. The girl beamed. Nathan knelt beside her, brushing her hair back. You doing okay, kiddo? She nodded. I like it here. It smells like cookies. He stood up again, catching Me's eyes across the counter. Something quiet passed between them. Not a moment, not yet, but something taking root. He helped set the table while Emily chatted with me about school and her bunny, and the fact that she didn't like rainy nights because they made the shadows in her room bigger. Me listened without rushing her, without the practiced patience of someone indulging a child, but with genuine interest. It had been a long time since Nathan had seen someone meet his daughter's words like they mattered. As they ate, the light outside grew stronger. The storm had passed, leaving behind washed skies and the first hints of a breeze that smelled like pine and dirt. Nathan's phone finally buzzed back to life. He stepped outside to call a tow, standing under the awning while the wind dried his hair. When he came back in, Emily was helping me dry dishes. Or more accurately, she was talking and waving a damp towel while me did most of the work. They said they can't send anyone till tomorrow morning, Nathan said. Flooded roads, they're backed up. Me met his gaze. You're welcome to stay the night. He hesitated. I don't want to impose. You didn't, she said. You just showed up. There's a difference. Emily tugged his sleeve. Can we stay, Daddy, please? He looked down at her, then at the woman across the room, then at the flickering hearth and the rain-streaked windows, and the second chance of quiet that somehow didn't feel like running anymore. Yeah, he said, we can stay. Me didn't smile, but she didn't have to. Something about her face softened all the same. The day settled into something Nathan hadn't realized he missed, stillness that didn't feel like failure. There was no calendar pinging reminders, no phone buzzing against his pocket demanding a decision. Outside, the world glistened in the aftermath of the storm, wet earth, dripping leaves, and patches of sky bluing through the clouds like a slow exhale. Me offered him a change of clothes, a pair of soft flannel pajama pants and an oversized Henley. They were clearly not hers, and he didn't ask who they had belonged to. She didn't explain. He only nodded and accepted them. There were quiet understandings forming between them, unspoken and strangely easy. While Emily napped that afternoon, curled up beneath the same blanket she'd slept in the night before, Nathan found himself helping me bring in firewood from the stack behind the cabin. The air was cool and fragrant with pine, and the damp ground muffled their steps. You're used to city life, me said, handing him a few logs. Is it that obvious? You carried the wood like it might file a lawsuit if you dropped it. He laughed again, easier this time, and followed her back inside. Me wasn't chatty, but she wasn't silent either. She spoke when she had something to say, and the quiet that filled the space between their conversations felt natural, like a long-held breath that didn't need to be released all at once. Nathan wasn't used to that. He was used to words as tools, persuasion, control, strategy, but Me's words came like stepping stones, simple, placed with care, never rushed. In the early evening, the power flickered back on, but Me didn't seem in any hurry to switch anything over. The fire stayed lit. Candles remained in their spots. She cooked dinner with a battery-powered lantern on the counter and soft music playing from an old radio near the bookshelf. Nathan offered to help again, and she let him peel carrots while she stirred a pot on the stove. Your daughter, she said eventually, glancing toward the couch where Emily had returned to her coloring book. She's more observant than most kids I've met. She notices everything, Nathan said. Her mother used to say it was a gift, but I think it scares her now. Me's brow lifted slightly, but she didn't press. Where's her mother now? Nathan hesitated. LA last I heard, we finalized the divorce a few months ago. Me stirred slowly, then set the spoon down. That's recent. Yeah, we thought staying together for Emily would be best, but turns out pretending we weren't breaking apart wasn't good for any of us. She nodded, the gesture quiet and without judgment. Kids know more than they say. I'm starting to learn that. They ate dinner at the kitchen table, the three of them. Nathan watched his daughter light up as Me asked her questions, not the polite, obligatory kind adults often asked, but real ones. About her favorite games, the book she liked reading at bedtime, what she wanted to be when she grew up. A vet, Emily said with her mouth half full of roasted potatoes. Or maybe someone who lives in the forest and talks to wolves. That's a very specific life plan, Me said, smiling gently. Emily grinned. I think it's cool. Me too. After dinner, Me brought out a board game, and Nathan found himself seated cross-legged on the floor beside his daughter, rolling dice and trying to remember when the last time was that he'd spent an evening like this. No distractions, no work calls, no guilt simmering beneath the surface. Just laughter and warmth, and the sound of logs crackling in the hearth. When Emily yawned, Nathan picked her up and brought her into the small guest room Me had readied with fresh sheets and a handmade quilt. She was asleep before her head hit the pillow. He stood in the doorway a moment longer than he needed to, watching her breathe. She's going to be okay, Me said behind him. He turned slightly. She's been through too much. You both have. He didn't answer, just followed Me back to the main room where the fire was low again and the rain had finally stopped for good. He moved to add another log, but she stopped him with a shake of her head. Let it burn down, it's warm enough. He sank onto the couch, and for a few minutes they just sat there, listening to the fire pop and the radio hum something slow and jazzy. Nathan rubbed his palms together, not from cold, but to keep from fidgeting. You ever wonder if everything you've built was the wrong thing? He asked. Me didn't look surprised by the question. I used to. What changed? I stopped building things just to prove I could. He nodded slowly. I thought I was doing it all for her, for Emily, providing stability, but I think I was just trying not to fall behind. Behind what? Everything, he said, the version of success people expect, the life I thought I wanted. I kept pushing forward, thinking if I stopped, everything would fall apart. And now? He looked toward the window. The sky outside was clearing, stars starting to peek through the thinning clouds. Now I'm wondering what happens if I stop long enough to figure out what matters. Me didn't speak right away. Then softly, that's a better place to start than most. He looked at her then, really looked, and saw not just a woman who'd taken them in without question, but someone who had built a life by stepping away from everything people told her she needed. There was something solid in that, not stubbornness but certainty. And yet, she didn't wear it like a shield. She offered it quietly like an open door. They sat in silence again, but this time Nathan felt it settle in his chest, not as absence but as presence. A moment not filled, not performed, but shared. When he finally stood, stretching, he felt the fatigue in his bones, but not the kind that came from fighting. The kind that came after letting go. I should turn in, he said. Me nodded. There are extra blankets in the closet. The couch is yours as long as you need it. He gave her a grateful nod, pausing at the hallway. Thanks again for everything. Good night, Nathan. And there was something in the way she said his name that lingered longer than it should have. Like it belonged here, like he did too. The next morning, the sun climbed quietly through the trees, pale and low like it wasn't entirely sure it was welcome after so much rain. Birds called softly from wet branches, and everything outside seemed paused in that moment before the day truly woke. Nathan was already up, sitting on the front porch steps with a mug of black coffee Me had brewed before dawn. It was strong, unfiltered, and perfect. He watched the light shift across the gravel drive, listening to the last of the water drip from the cabin's eaves. His clothes had dried overnight on the line Me strung in the kitchen, and now he wore his own jeans and a soft sweater she had found tucked in the back of a cedar trunk, one she said had been left behind by someone who never came back for it. Inside, Emily was still asleep. Her coloring book lay open on the rug where she'd fallen asleep again the night before, mid-sentence, mid-giggle, her hand still holding a crayon. Me had carefully lifted her and tucked her back into bed. Nathan ran a hand over his jaw, not yet shaved, not yet burdened by the day's plans. If this had been a normal morning, he would have already been in a car downtown, reviewing quarterly projections and putting out fires he barely believed in anymore. But here, The only sound was wind brushing the trees and the low scrape of me's boots as she rounded the side of the house carrying a crate of eggs. "Your girl's still sleeping," she said as she set the crate down near the door. "I'm not surprised, she doesn't usually rest like that." Me leaned a hip against the railing and pulled her braid over one shoulder. That's what safety does. It lets the body remember what stillness feels like. Nathan studied her in the light of morning, noting how her face softened without the firelight flickering against it. She looked real here, more than just the stranger who had opened her door to him in the dark. She looked rooted. "You always this comfortable letting people stay without knowing anything about them?" She shrugged. "I figure anyone showing up in the middle of a rainstorm with a child and no coat isn't here to cause trouble." "Still," he said, "you didn't even ask who I was." "I figured you'd tell me when you were ready." He stared into his mug. "I used to run a private equity firm, Midtown, Caldwell and Finch." Me gave a faint nod, her face unreadable. "We sold it a year ago. I've been doing consulting since, but I haven't really been living." Me stepped down from the porch, brushing her hands on her jeans. "So stop calling that living, give it another name." He tilted his head slightly. "Is that what you did?" She paused, then looked up at him. "I used to teach, literature, university level, thought that's who I'd be forever. Tenure track, academic conferences, journal publications. Then my mother got sick and I left everything to take care of her. When she passed, I didn't go back." "What made you stay here?" There was nothing left in the old life worth returning to. Nathan felt that truth land like a soft weight in his chest. He nodded, slow. By the time Emily wandered out in her socks, blinking against the morning, me already had breakfast on the stove. Bacon crisping, bread toasting, eggs cracked into a bowl like it was the most natural thing in the world to feed two near strangers without blinking. Emily leaned into Nathan's side, still warm from sleep. "Are we still here?" "We are." "Good," she looked at me. "Can I help stir?" Me handed her a spoon and motioned toward the bowl of eggs. "Be gentle, like you're painting clouds." Emily beamed. Later, while they ate, me handed Nathan a notepad with a list of local garages and phone numbers she'd written in careful print. "The tow company called just after sunrise. Roads are clear now. They'll be by this afternoon." He nodded, unsure whether the knot in his stomach was relief or something else entirely. After breakfast, me took Emily outside to meet the chickens. Nathan watched from the kitchen window as his daughter giggled over speckled eggs and awkward clucks, me squatting beside her and explaining something with her hands as Emily repeated every word back with more drama than necessary. The morning unfolded slowly. No plans, just minutes stacking into something that felt suspiciously like peace. The tow truck arrived just after lunch, rumbling up the long driveway, trailing dust and sun through the trees. The mechanic, an older man with a grease-streaked cap and a crooked smile, loaded the car without comment, only nodding once when Nathan mentioned the engine had simply stopped. "It happens," the man said. "You were lucky to break down where you did, not much out here except trees and bad cell service." Nathan glanced back at the cabin. "Yeah, I got lucky." Emily hugged me tight before they left, arms wrapped around her middle like she'd known her for years. "Thank you for the pancakes and the bunny bed and the forest talk." Me crouched to meet her eye. "Take care of your dad, he needs reminding sometimes." Emily nodded solemnly. "He forgets stuff when he works too much." Me looked at Nathan but didn't comment. She just stood and walked them to the car. Nathan paused before opening the door. "I don't think I said thank you properly." "You didn't need to." "But I want to." Me crossed her arms, leaning against the porch post. "I don't think you ended up here by accident." "You believe in that kind of thing." She gave a small smile. "I believe people show up where they're supposed to, even if they don't know why yet." He held her gaze, something low in his chest stirred. Not longing, not yet, just recognition. A sense that she saw him, not as a broken man or a high-powered professional out of place, but as someone worth waiting on. "I don't know what I'm doing next," he said. Me nodded. "Maybe don't decide just yet." He looked back toward the road, then toward her again. "If I came back, just to say hello." She didn't smile, but her eyes did. Then I'd open the door again. Nathan got in the car, started the engine, and pulled slowly down the drive. Emily waved out the window until the trees swallowed the cabin from view. It wasn't until they reached the edge of town that he realized his chest didn't feel as heavy. And for the first time in a long while, the idea of not having a plan didn't feel like failure. It felt like permission. Nathan didn't return the next day. Or the day after that. He meant to the moment he crossed the town line, the moment Emily fell asleep in the backseat, her bunny tucked beneath her chin like nothing had happened at all. But life has a way of filling back in around a man like concrete. Emails piled up, clients called. His assistant rescheduled 3 meetings for the same Tuesday, and just like that, the quiet fell away. Back in the city, the noise returned, the relentless churn of obligation, the polished world of glass offices and unspoken expectations. He slipped back into it like muscle memory, efficient and hollow. The suit, the elevator, the conference calls, each day tightly packed, carefully steered, and entirely devoid of the stillness he'd found in that cabin. But something had shifted, subtly and irreversibly. He noticed it when he reached for his phone over breakfast and saw Emily watching him, her cereal spoon idle. He set the phone down instead. He felt it when he canceled a late meeting and took her to the park instead, watching her trace paths through fallen leaves with the same intensity she used in coloring books. There were moments now when he chose differently, not because he had to, but because he could, because Me's words lived quietly in the back of his mind. Don't decide just yet. Weeks passed. He kept the number she scribbled in the margin of that paper list, the local garage, second from the bottom, folded into the inside of his wallet. And then one morning in late October, the city woke up under a sky the color of ash. Cold air curled under doors. Nathan stared out his window as the world below moved like clockwork. His reflection in the glass looked tired, even after sleep. He turned around, crossed the apartment, and packed a bag. They didn't say much on the drive. Emily sang softly to herself in the backseat, her voice trailing in and out of made-up lyrics. The GPS dropped signal 2 miles from the cabin, just like last time, but Nathan didn't need it. When they turned onto the gravel drive, the trees arched overhead like old friends. Golden leaves littered the path, and smoke drifted from the chimney in the same soft curl he remembered. The porch light was off, it was barely noon, but he could see her through the window, back to them, hands busy with something at the counter. He parked and stepped out into air that smelled like wood smoke and rain-soaked leaves. Emily tumbled out after him, dragging her bunny by one ear. Nathan walked up the porch steps and knocked once, then waited. Me opened the door. This time she smiled, not with surprise but with a warmth that said she'd known he might come. Eventually. I didn't call first, he said. She shrugged. Some doors don't need a warning. He stepped back so Emily could run in. She darted toward the basket of kindling by the fireplace like it was her own room. Me didn't blink. Nathan lingered in the doorway. I didn't know what I was looking for when I left here, he said. And now, I don't know what it's called, but it's quieter. Me met his eyes. Sometimes quiet is the only thing honest enough to show you what's real. Nathan breathed out slowly. The weight hadn't gone, not entirely, but it didn't drag anymore. It just reminded him of who he didn't want to be again. I'm not here to fix anything, he said, or to ask for anything. Me stepped back, letting the light stretch across the floor between them. You're just here. He nodded. I'm just here. She didn't reach for him. She didn't offer a seat or coffee or ask what came next. She just turned back toward the kitchen. And this time he followed her in. He helped peel apples for a pie, the same way he'd peeled carrots weeks before. Emily sang again from the rug near the hearth. Me didn't fill the silence. Nathan didn't try to impress her with stories from another life. They didn't talk about what it meant to show up or what happened after. The fire was already going, the house already warm. And for once, that was enough.